We all have decision filters. If you've got 20 years of experience in the field as a contractor, there's like 100 things that go through your mind in a split second as you pull up to a job site. The decision filters are going to help your team and your leaders decide, what SOP do I need to use? That's what makes you the leader.
So, David, I really appreciate you coming on the call with us. I wanted to have you on because, for one, we're using some new technology. We're using this remote podcast, which I know is not going to be as great of sound as it would have been if we were to have done it in the studio. But I definitely appreciate you coming on and trying this out with me. We're wrapping up 2025, and we're here on the 29th of December. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know both of us have made some commitments to try to, work with some other people on some other podcasts, just get some other perspectives on business. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to have you on and maybe not talk so much about our business, but maybe talk a little bit about your business, and maybe we can talk a little bit about how our businesses relate, how they're the same, and maybe how they're a little bit different. But you are a landscape company owner. You have also a coaching business too. So wearing a few different hats, of course, at multiple businesses. But you've also successfully created and exited a couple of businesses as well. So glad to have you here, and thanks for making the time, and let's get started.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a unique blend right now. I grew up on a farm, and so just to preemptively address that, I grew up on a cattle farm in the Midwest, so delegation and communication, those things were very much farm-like for me. I was the guy that was get out of the way, let me do it, I'll do it faster, we got to get this done. Volume was not an issue for me at all growing up on the farm and in construction as a kid, learning the trades. So I've been through stonemasonry as a tender all the way through landscape, everything. And I've had 3 landscape companies, 2 of them that I sold successfully and exited. We've had a logistics retail business for books and distribution. And then we had a retail bike shop for actually 8 years, the last 8 years, until early in 25. And really enjoyed that, but retail life is different, and we sold that successfully to keep that community going, had a great time there. So that's my business background is pretty broad. Worked in an architecture office with my grandpa's company for a while I was in high school. I've worked in gyms. It was just I like to learn a lot.
A little eclectic.
And so the way I ended up where I'm at now as the COO of Taussig is when we sold the bike shop, I went full-time in operational coaching and consulting, and did an efficiency consultation with a friend of mine here at Taussig, Derek Taussig, the CEO and owner, and went through some things, and he was in the position needing an operations leader, COO type role, and we were trying to put that together and find the right way to get that in for him, and conversation led to, this would just be a really good fit. Yeah. So here I am. So I've been here for last few months. And so it's utilizing my experience and my coaching really internally. And so I'm kind of like the internal coach for the team here. It's kind of what the COO does anyway.
Yeah.
That's been a fun journey.
Cool.
Long story short.
So you talk a little bit about decision filters. So can you tell me, maybe for people who don't actually know what a decision filter is, maybe explain what that is, and then also why do you feel like they matter more than a standard SOP or a standard operating procedure?
Yeah. So we all have decision filters. It's how we filter information to make decisions, right? We've all had different experiences and different teaching and training. It kind of sneaks in on you and builds up over time. So if you've got 20 years of experience in the field as a contractor, there's like 100 things that go through your mind in a split second as you pull up to a job site. The things you see where the materials are and where the trucks are and where the crew is and where the equipment is and which directions they're going and what's the traffic like around the job site and all these things, right? And so you're able to see through all of those filters so fast, to make a quick decision. And those are the levels of things that help you. That's what makes you the leader. That's what gives you the
Sure.
experience
Yeah.
you have. And so as you start to bring on a team and new leaders on your team and raising people up that may not have all of that experience and been able to see those things and make mistakes and learn, and they don't have those same filters, and so they can't make those decisions as accurately and as quickly unless you place those filters there for them. So an SOP is going to be a good way to start that. An SOP is a great way to know how to do a process and do it repeatedly, like cleanly in the same way. But the decision filters are going to help your team and your leaders decide, what SOP do I need to use? What
Right.
actually fits this situation, right?
That's a good point.
What's going to throw the red flag that they even know they need to adjust something. Those decision filters are what help them see that more quickly and more accurately.
I think even, if we go back earlier into business, I think so many people, including myself, had no idea really how to even or why I would need an SOP, right? Like why there was a reason to have some of these processes in my business, because I'm like, well, I know the business, I know what to do. I don't need to write it down, right? And I think that's a very common misconception for early business owners is that, it's never too early to start implementing systems and building your systems because, you're never going to be able to get out of that day to day and be able to work on the business and creating more systems if you're just, if you're not writing anything down. So I think, it's important to understand. I think the way I'm kind of interpreting, the decision filter process for you would be more of a mental kind of aspect of how you begin to make these filters, but then your SOP is more of a, the written procedure for that specific system. But I think you're saying
Yeah.
or suggesting that maybe that your decision filter, your natural decision filter, or how you perceive the decision making process is going to help you understand or point you in the right direction for which SOP you might need to solve your specific problem or work through and address a particular system.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of maybe we could call it the table of contents.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a way to put a table of contents on your SOPs, and I actually have an SOP for decision filters now on like how to train your team to make those. What questions should they be asking themselves? Like all those things that I listed off. Like, do we have the right equipment? Do we have the right materials? Is this going to impact the timeline? Do I need to communicate with the customer? Do I need to escalate this to a manager? Like all those questions that we just give in a document, whether it's digital or physical, depending on the team. And if they run into an issue, an obstacle, a hesitation of some type, they can start reading those questions and get their mind heading the right direction. So when they talk, if they can't figure it out on their own at that point, at least they're headed the right direction with their options they bring when they call their supervisor.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I know we've talked a lot about scaling and scaling beyond like the $1 and even the $5 million mark. And I think there are a lot of businesses, a lot of business owners who get stuck at that kind of $1 and $2 million range. And I think a lot of it has to do with, and we've talked about this and we've talked about this outside of this call, but the ability to get from 0 to 1 and or 2 million, 2 million kind of seems to be about that kind of magic number, can really be done. I think a lot of people agree with me. Some people will not, but I think a lot of people would agree that you can get to that $1 and $2 million mark just by hustle, by sheer hustle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And getting beyond that mark and breaking that like $3 to $5 million mark, because think that's probably an approximate range of where people tend to get stuck kind of underneath, and kind of breaking through that kind of plateau where people hit and they feel like they're jammed up against that maybe $1 or $2 million mark. There's now that next hurdle of 3 to 5. And I think that usually it takes more than just hustle and, sheer work ethic and working long days and nights and, feeling like you've got fairly decent systems. There's another layer that usually prohibits people from getting there. Can you tell me a little bit about either your previous, businesses that you've been able to get past that hurdle, or even maybe some other businesses that you have helped in your coaching business scale past that $3 to $5 million mark?
Yeah. It's, I mean, it boils down to that one layer of delegation, right? It's you could say it's control, it's ego, it's pride, a lot of the different things. Nobody can do it as well as me. I can't find, blah, blah, blah. But that's that separator, somebody that takes the leap and delegates and learns to delegate properly, and not just dumping it on somebody. We see a lot of that, right? It's like, well, I'm supposed to delegate, so here, you do it. And doing it in a way I like the word layers in this situation, because you delegate in layers. You release authority in certain phases until that trust and that confidence is built there so that it can be done. And it takes a little bit of trust in the beginning, a little bit of faith to let go, right? Because that hustle,
That's tough.
our identity can get caught up in that, right? And it's like, man, I just built this thing out of sheer grit, and I can hustle, and I can't find anybody to hustle like me. And it's like, well, that's okay. You don't want, that's long term not the best. You want some hustle in your team. Don't get me wrong on that.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But long term culture wise, you want people that understand how to leverage and not just put their head down and grind it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was tough for me. I know, as a business owner, especially early on. I think it's hard for everybody, right? I think a big one, which I know you and I have met kind of indirectly through a book that we both read, which is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
Yeah.
So obviously a little plug for him here as well. Not that he needs it. But either way, phenomenal book. Hope anybody who's watching this will read that, especially business owners, because there are some extremely important lessons, I think, in there, and some kind of nudges to help people kind of get on that road. But one thing that Dan has even talked about quite a bit. Watching him on Instagram and listening to him in some other places is, not only are some of these concepts a little bit foreign to people, but it's really difficult for people to release that, especially business owners, to release that, just the control that they feel like they have over the business, and to release that and feel like it's okay to, for example, I know one of the big things in his book was an executive assistant, right? Hiring an executive assistant. And I know I've talked with your executive assistant. She's talked with mine. I think sometimes we don't always know who's talking to each other, which is weird. And sometimes I think that was a big deal for me too. I had a hard time thinking that my executive assistant would be able to respond as quickly or as nicely or in the same voice that I would. But there's so many remedial tasks that I'm doing with my inbox or with my calendaring, and just these are all tasks that they're not a good use of my time, right?
Yeah.
And my time is extremely valuable. There's only so much of it. And so you really have to learn how to divide yourself and figure out how you start to relinquish some of those tasks. So I think that, when you're talking about scaling from, beyond that two, maybe even $3 to $5 million mark, it is giving up a lot of the control, right? And eventually all of it, right? And I think you have successfully been able to exit a couple of businesses now in even different lines of work. And obviously you had to do that, right? At some point you have to relinquish all of those responsibilities, and those have to be delegated to everyone. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about that too. And I obviously, I want you to be able to talk a little bit about your coaching program. I don't want you to give everything away here. I know you can't in a 30-minute or a 60-minute podcast, but what can you maybe tell people about, like, who's, if they're feeling like trapped in the kind of the grind of their business, like how do you help them shift from an operator to like a strategic leader, to try to help them achieve that freedom that they might be looking for?
Yeah. That first step, and we both like, it's another piece that's not, unique to Buy Back Your Time with Dan Martell, but doing a time audit. It's a very common thing to do, right? Figuring out what are the things that you're doing that are giving you energy versus draining your energy, and what are the things that are bringing income, and what are the things that are not bringing income, or at least at a separation of the level of income that they're producing for the business, and finding the things that are both energy giving and income producing are the best place for the owner, the CEO, the leader to be spending their time, right? And so finding a way
The $10 tasks.
yeah, $10 an hour versus $1,000 an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
And so doing that time audit, and then I love the 10-80-10 rule, where it's like that left enough control for me, and I didn't have a label for it all the time. It just, that's how I like to. Once I learned proper delegation, I still wanted to watch and measure and have control over what was going on. I tried the abdication, delegate by abdication, and just like dump it on them and like, all right, you're supposed to do this.
Feed them to the wolves.
Figure it out and call me if you have any questions. And that never worked.
Yeah.
And so being able to like build the beginning of it, structure the plan, hand that off cleanly, and then at the end be able to come in and like finalize it and make sure that everything is polished the way it needs to be. So 10% me, they do the 80%, and then 10% of the finish together, or myself or whatever. It really allowed me to feel still involved, but it took the bulk of the heavy lifting off of the like monotonous stuff.
Sure.
So it's still a great place for me to live, and that's still how I like to do things and coach on it. Is there's still the value needed in both ends, but that stuff in the middle, that's the structure of that.
Yeah. I was digging through my papers here on my desk because I thought this was interesting. So this is our executive assistant task allocation, right? It's like, yeah, these are just, this is just something that she actually made recently.
Okay.
And, people don't think about, these are all the remedial tasks. These are all the things that I was doing for who knows how many years. Yeah. My wife actually runs the, what's that?
You got over 2 pages of lines that like,
2 pages. And these are, daily tasks, weekly tasks, monthly tasks. Something as simple as grabbing water, on the way in, for clients, or grabbing some sodas to put in the fridge for clients that we meet here at the office. It all seems so simple, and it is, right? And maybe I already have to go to the store, or maybe I have to do something, but any time that I have to take time out of my day to do one of those, again, we call them the $10 tasks, that's something that takes away from something that I could be doing. And there are certain things within a business that the owner is likely the only one who can do that task, right? But in order for them to be efficient at that and have time freed up to either be flexible or to do other things or operate or function in other businesses, even, there are a lot of business owners like yourself who own multiple businesses. And in order to give your attention to another business, you really have to have one business really basically operating itself, right? Because like you said, I know with me, especially with that first big hire of trying to let go of some of those simple tasks or let go of my inbox, like that was a really hard one for me at least, and it still is, from time to time, right? It's just
Yeah.
because sometimes you don't know, right? What is there a mistake that's been made in the background and I don't even really know? That can be a tough pill to swallow for somebody that is new to kind of delegating some of those tasks that you've done forever. Um, but I think it's important to understand that there is no way to get out of that grind unless you give some of those tasks away. Another question I wanted to ask you specifically was, how do you feel that operational stress can spill into family life and health? And then how do you reverse that, or how do you suggest that someone reverses that?
Yeah. It's I've got a 2, almost 3-year-old right now, and we got one coming in about a month. And so,
Congratulations.
thank you. And so I mean, I'm in the midst of making sure that I stay real on that for myself. And I would say, just from fresh reminders, closing the loops, right? Open loops are what cause the stress operationally. It's just, they say all the time, like as a builder, you understand, like, especially when somebody's doing like DIY projects or something, they've got like 10 different projects in the house that aren't quite done.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
almost there, but they're just not quite done. And you underestimate the amount of stress that puts on you living in that environment, right? I mean, you walk by and like the trim's up, but it's not finished. It's not like puttied and caulked and painted, and it's just like raw, like little things like that you just like, oh, I need to get to that. Oh, I need to do, oh, somebody needs to, and that is what I have found when I can close those loops, stay structured, stay disciplined, and keep that part handled, especially in business, but also at home. That's operationally, I'm much smoother. I'm happier. I have less pressure on me, so I don't carry those things home. But when there's the open loops that then start to stack because you got to do taxes this time, get ready to do taxes this time of year, and there's a lot of year-end stuff that needs to wrap up, and what are we prepping for this bedroom, and like it'll start to mix, right? So too many open loops is what's going to add that pressure, and just making sure you have a plan and a structure to keep those from getting
Yeah.
too hairy.
I agree. I think that was tough, especially early on. I would say within maybe the first 5 or maybe 10 years of being in business myself. It was tough to juggle, especially not having the right people in place to take some of that burden, or take some of that off of your shoulders, and to give you that time to be with your family. And I think there were so many times where I got a little resentful of my employees, right? Who would, they're effectively just kind of punching a clock, right? They're here to do a job and they get to go home at whatever time they're going home. And a lot of times, yeah. And a lot of times I was here in the morning before them and I was leaving afterwards. And you do start to build it's not necessarily warranted, but you do sometimes start to build a resentment. And it wasn't until I realized that this resentment that I had was not necessarily unfounded, but it's the resentment was really up to myself, right? I was the one who was causing this. This wasn't them. It wasn't their fault that I was there before them and they're later than them. And I think sometimes people who have not been in business ownership or don't really understand that, they might think, well, that's just the way it is, right? That was your choice, right? Which is true.
Stories, right? Like,
Yeah.
my dad was a business owner and he was there till midnight doing the books and doing all these things, and just like that's what we think is business ownership.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit here, but I this is one that I hear all the time too. Is not all the time, but periodically from a client is, well, isn't that just the cost of doing business? And my favorite answer is always, well, sure, it is absolutely the cost of doing business, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Just like any other business, any cost of doing business is paid for by the client. Like it ultimately, this all trickles down to the client, right? It's not just something that gets absorbed, by the owner. And the owner may choose at some point in time to give away something, right? Whatever. And in that case, maybe it is truly absorbed by the owner. But generally speaking, the costs of doing business should be passed on to the owner. If the owner is doing their job right and they're understanding what their costs actually are and they're charging a fair price, and one that allows them to make a profit and pay their people a good wage and provide them with benefits and all the things that we all want, right? And most of us have, right? These, we have, paid time off, and we have, health benefits and 401ks, and these are all things that we have to provide to our employees for them to wake up in the morning and want to come to work, right? They could, because you can get, especially now, like as we see kind of economies change a little bit, and as we see, I know at least in California, as we see the minimum wage increase, right? You realize that some of the guys that we had 10 years ago that were working kind of at the lower end of what we were doing can now go do that at fast food, right? And I'm not suggesting that they don't have any room to grow, because there's probably a lot of opportunities in fast food to do that, but we had to really change strategically the way that we operated, and a lot of that meant providing a greater wage for even some of our lower end workers, like laborers, people who are sweeping and cleaning. They can make $20 an hour anywhere now, right? So it's just important to understand that all these costs, they do go to the end user or the person who benefits from the ultimate purchase. So
Especially in order to scale, right?
sure.
If the owner wants to work 16, 18, 20 hours a day doing those extra things and not charge accordingly, that's up to them, right?
That was a joke that I always said too, was, and I didn't coin this, somebody else told it to me a long time ago, but it's really cool to be a business owner because I have a ton of flexibility. And the coolest part is that I get to pick which 80 hours of the week I want to work, and it was funny for the longest time. I thought it was funny. And now I look back and I'm like, gosh, every once in a while I do have to work a long day. I'm not going to lie, but it's much more rare and I don't have that same kind of odd resentment that I used to have with my employees. It's now I'm coming in later than them, and sometimes I'm leaving earlier than them, and I don't feel bad, right? This is something that I've put in the time, I've put in the work to do this. Our business will be in about 6 months will be 20 years old. So
Congrats.
we've been there, right? We've been through the grind, and we have kind of worked through some of these different levels, and not without a lot of hardship too, right? And learning things the hard way. And sometimes it's the insanity thing too. You're beating your head against the wall and hoping for a different result. But
When
yeah,
something you just said that I want your perspective on.
sure.
And I think what I've found is it's been one of the hardest, most difficult shifts for a lot of business owners who are growing from, especially in the trades, as like a technician that started a business, and then it grew and they had a team and they had to learn how to lead a team and how to really run a business, not just do a service very well. Is as the business owner, you don't have a daily job description, right?
It's a good point.
When you build out an org chart as a systems guy, as you build out your org chart or your accountability chart, the owner doesn't have to be there, doesn't have to do anything. The owner is the investor or the visionary or somebody that, is going to, you're going to check certain things and make certain decisions for the long term. And then you got to put yourself into whatever the seat is of the role that you are putting yourself in. So if you're the CEO or the COO or both, if you're, a unique thing here for Derek and I, he's a CEO, I'm a COO. He's also a designer in sales position because he loves it. And so it's a unique thing. Like, we have to look at it as, okay, if I was the owner, how would I evaluate myself in that position? Right. So as the owner, it's easy to kind of get like, well, I work 80 hours some weeks and 20 others, and I have the freedom to do. And it's like, okay, hold on. Okay. As the owner, I don't have tasks. As the role that I'm filling in the org chart, what's that role description? What are the obligations of that and the responsibilities of that? And am I performing that to the level that I would allow my team to perform it? And then that helped me really shift my viewpoint of my purpose and my intention on my day to day.
Yeah.
And I tightened up so I wasn't working as many 80-hour weeks, because I realized, wait, if I can sit in that seat or not sit in that seat, that means I can hire somebody else to sit in that seat. I don't have to sit in any seat, really. I can hire somebody to do it once that's there, if I'm willing to, And then if you're not charging accordingly to be able to do that, then you're pricing wrong.
For sure. I think one of the things, to build on that maybe a little bit, and maybe this is a little bit indirectly building on that, is when for years I knew, to a certain extent, I knew that in order to get out of the kind of rat race that I was in, meant that I had to get more people, right? But it wasn't just about more people. And I think that was where we went wrong, was that we really started trying, and this wasn't a conscious thought, and maybe that's part of the problem, but this was something that we really focused on, was getting people in, and we always tried to build from the bottom up, right? And so the biggest problem that I saw with that was that not only was that just really difficult, but the reason that it was really difficult is because most of your kind of lower end or lower cost employees need more of you, or need more of that management, right? So unless you have somebody to delegate those people as they're incoming, starting from the bottom is not where it's at. And I think that that's a really difficult thing for a lot of people that are in business, and maybe they are the operator, right? They're the one who's in the day to day. They're making things happen. They're trying to figure out how to replace themselves, or how to begin to replace themselves. And maybe that means replacing themselves with 3 other people, and making that first hire to basically start to get rid of some of those hats. I think the answer, for at least for our business, was really looking to hire from the top. Like, what is the number one thing that eats my time? Maybe the number 1 and 2 things even that eat my time. And let's figure out if I can get somebody in here to really take away a bulk of that and just start to free me up. Let's just say I could hire somebody that could take 30% of what I do and do it really well. Yep. I think that's how people have to look at this if they're watching and thinking like, I need to figure out how to make that first hire. Don't just hire somebody at the bottom and expect that your problems are going to go away. They're probably going to double. Because now not only have you got somebody who you can now delegate things to, but it's going to be very inefficient delegation, because you're going to ask them to do something, they're going to go do it, or they're going to make an attempt to do it, or maybe they'll make a half-assed attempt to do it, and then they're going to come back to you and ask you how to do it, right? And then you're going to have to train them, you're going to have to do this. And I'm not suggesting you're not going to have to train from the top down too, right? But I think again, where I feel like I made the mistake was not hiring killers, right?
Okay.
Like going out and finding somebody who's just going to grind with you, who's all in, they're ready to go,
Yeah.
and they want to do well and they want to stay at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
And you need to pay somebody well to do that. You gotta make them at least a little bit excited about waking up in the morning, right?
Yep.
And they're going to do that with the right wage and with some paid time off and all these other things. But that was really what was a big shift for me. And I'll be honest, that didn't actually happen until I had some coaching myself, some professional coaching. And it was because I was the bottleneck, just like so many other businesses, right? That the owners are typically the bottleneck. They're typically the place where everything gets kind of jammed up in your funnel and doesn't really allow things to flow through nicely. And so again, going back to, hiring, I always tell people, hey, hire from the top down. Don't try to start down here. Fill those when you want to fill those little low end roles in. Those really should be people that maybe even your guys are hiring, or at least they're managing, right? So that you don't have to deal with that, because that's not something that's going to take something off of your plate. It's just going to add to it, I think.
So question on that, because that's a great subject, or a great topic for owners to wrap their minds around. If you were starting over again, or you were starting a trades business of any kind today, and you do the service very well yourself, and you're the technician, right? And that's why you split off. That's why you started your own thing. You can go do it very well and make good money. And now it's grown to the point where you're working 15, 16 hours a day. You're missing kids' ball games or events. You're not getting home for dinner very often. Things are just, you got so much going on. You got to do the books, you got to do emails, and you got to do quotes, and you got to do communications and get materials and get everything prepped and all these things. Where would you start? What would be the first hire you would make, knowing what you know now, if you're back in that position? And
yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I know the answer for that for most people, but I think it might be a little bit different for everybody. It might depend a little bit on the business or what line of work you're actually in. But I do think that it could vary, right? If you are truly the technician, you are going to do it better than anybody else. And I refer to the E-Myth book, sometimes, because it's like, I think that while I don't want to discourage people from doing things themselves and really doing what, they aspire to do, or to get into business for themselves, it is a really good book. And the ironic part is I read that book after I was in business. So maybe I would have talked myself out of going into business to begin with. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm pretty pig-headed sometimes, so I think that I probably still would have done it. I would have said, forget this book. I know what I'm doing. But I think, just understanding that most people get into business with really good intentions, but they're really crappy at business. And some people don't know what that means. They don't realize that, like you just said, you just gave us a laundry list of the things that business owners do when they're new, because they're the operator and they're wearing every single hat. They're doing the books, they're doing the estimating, they're giving bids, they're answering phone calls, they're doing all the things. Well, what is it that you do well? I would say, if we're trying to figure out what that first hire is, what is it that you do well, and what is it that you don't? Because maybe the don't is someplace that you should start looking. Do I not do bookkeeping very well? Do I even know how to bookkeep? Right? Like, a lot of people don't.
right.
It's not just a matter of opening your phone and checking your balance, right? That's not bookkeeping, and paying your invoices.
There's money in the bank, I'm good, right?
Yeah, exactly. The lights are on. That's a good thing. That's a part of it, right? But it's not all of it. But I think you got to figure out what you do well and what maybe you don't do well, and maybe you start to look at like, or what do you just not like to do, right? And figure out what those daily tasks are that you don't like to do, and just start to figure out what outweighs the other things, right? Do the list of tasks that you sort it by, you make a list of tasks that you like to do and ones that you don't like to do, ones that you're good at that you're not good at, and see where there's some overlap there, and see if there's a position that can fulfill as many of those tasks as possible. That's what I would say. And maybe you find yourself, maybe that list of things that you don't like to do is actually really short. Maybe the things that you're not very good at is really short. Maybe the other, side of the list is really heavy. I would implore people to think about maybe trying to fill that role first, if possible.
Yeah.
Because maybe even getting yourself out of doing the thing that you like to do means that you maybe still get to do it, and or, kind of indirectly do it for somebody, but maybe you're better at these other things. So I think it could be, at least in our industry, I think these top two positions would be an executive assistant and probably some sort of a higher level project manager. And so, that project management role for me took a huge amount of stuff off of my plate, stuff that I thought I could only do. And it took me a long time to realize that, like, this isn't rocket science, right? We're building houses, we're remodeling. There's a lot to it, and I'm not trying to diminish that at all. There's a huge skill set that's required to do this, including managing these things. There's a reason that we've been in business for 20 years and people continue to pay us for these things, because it isn't easy. Is it something that people can figure out and do themselves? Absolutely. No problem. Go get some books. It's probably going to take me 4 months. It's probably going to take you 14. And it may not turn out as nice, and you may have a lot of headache on the way there, but that's what you're paying a professional to do, right? I mean, I think I could probably build a car too, but it's a lot easier for me to just go to the dealership and just pay for one. I could probably save myself a little bit of money, but it's not going to save me any headache or time and effort. So I think, probably those two roles, probably that executive assistant, because again, those are usually a lot of $10 tasks lay there, and I don't want to diminish that position either, but I think that's where so many of those low level tasks are usually at. And if somebody can take 90% of your low level tasks, then it really frees you up and boosts you to be able to do the things that you do well.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And I like both of those for similar reasons, right? It's, they're not, product delivery in a direct way, right? They are the part that generally, for, especially in the trades, it's a people heavy position, a communication heavy position. And a lot of times when we get started as owners, especially if we're visionary, like that communication side doesn't come easily. We think we're saying things clearly because we're talking about the picture we see, but it's not coming out in a language that is fully understood on the other side all the time.
Yeah.
And so filling both those roles, the executive assistant who can communicate and handle the administrative things to happen smoothly, while you're not flustered and trying to communicate that way. And then the project manager to be able to slow down in both of those roles and operate in a really intentional, focused way brings a ton of value, and it takes a lot of pressure off. But like you said, there's going to be that handoff season where there's the training and the process, and having those processes either in place or started that you can fine tune to make sure that they succeed in those roles. Because what I found is that a lot of times the perfect personality for those roles, which my wife is amazing at, I like to call them race car drivers. They know how to, you give them a really fast car, a really well-tuned car, they can drive that thing, and they can tell you like, hey, it's pulling a little to the right, it's pulling a little to the left, this tire keeps slipping, whatever. But to actually fix it or build it, they're not a mechanic and they're not an engineer. So they're not necessarily going to build the system, but if you give them a good system, they can drive it way better than you ever would.
That's a great analogy. I really like that. I think, and this also goes back to, sorry to interrupt, but just real quick point here. I think this goes back to talking about the 10-80-10 rule, which, again, people can find in the book if they want to get a little bit deeper into that. But you talking about needing to, or feeling the need to, kind of check in on that person. If you have, again, maybe let's just say those two people, or you've managed to make those first two big hires, whatever those roles may be, but let's just say for this kind of theoretical example, or at least what I feel are the two big ones in the, this kind of trade, line of work. If you can get rid of those, those things, get them off your plate, put them onto two other plates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it gives you the time to properly evaluate. And obviously that's not going to take you nearly as long because you know how to do that. You can look through, see what they've done well, maybe what they've made some mistakes on. You can do some quick training, retuning, and then send them back to doing that. But I think that allows you that time to be able to do that.
Yeah. And you put the right scorecard or KPIs in place that gives you the right numbers and the right measurements to look at, and just set your guardrails on it and know, okay, if this performance gets below here, then we look at, is it a process or a training issue, right? What do we need to do to make sure we get back into that safe zone? And making sure that those touch points are there. And that's what helped me to feel like I wasn't out of control. I wasn't just letting somebody else take my business and do what they wanted with it. It was, here's the process, here's how we do it, here's how I make decisions through these questions. And then I had touch points to look at, whether daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, on certain areas. And they knew that, and they know what are the things that they are trying to perform to, what are they measured by. So there's no just vague target for them either. We as a business owner have to have a clear target, an intention of where we're going, and we need it. Every role on our team should have that equal target within the big target.
Right. Yeah. So another question for you. So what do you think causes a team to stop bringing solutions and then they only bring you problems?
You just answer them. It's really easy to train them that way.
Yeah.
Somebody comes with a question and you say, yeah, just do this.
Well, it's funny because actually, so we talked about this a little bit, but this is actually something that I have, before I had even read Buy Back Your Time. And what is his actually? I'm actually forgetting right now. Is it it's like the 1-3, is it the 1-3-1?
1-3-1. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a 3D. That's what I call it, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, we have something similar, but it's really just kind of as simple as I don't pay you to bring me a problem, right? But I pay you to create solutions. That being said, there are going to be things that legitimately our guys are going to need our help, right? Or they're going to need some external help. And I'm happy to do that, but I'm not happy to do that if I don't know that they've at least making an attempt, right? I don't want somebody to bring me a problem that they can't say, hey, here are the three things that I've tried, or the two things that I've tried. These are the things that I normally go through, and these all didn't work. So, or maybe this is a really unique situation where none of these kind of apply, these things that I've done in the past.
Yeah.
So, can I get your help? Of course. But I want to know that you've taken a stab at it.
Yeah. And even within like a lot of times we say, well, there's an SOP that will fix that, right? Just create an SOP. And sometimes that's like the bulk of things, 80%, right? But there's those 20% outlier situations where even if they had the SOP and they went through it, they might not find a solution. That's just like just a unique situation that happens once every 5 or 6 years, and you just didn't have it on your radar to make a process around it, right?
Yeah.
And so as long as they've used the process when they come to you, that helps a lot. When they bring that to you, it's, there's the 1-3-1, there's the 10-80-10, there's all these rules around it. But the thing that even before I learned all of that, I would have a sticky note on my computer monitor if I was in my office and somebody came in to ask a question. And they would come in and ask, and I would say, that's a great question. What do you think? That was my reminder not to answer the question, because I would have
Yeah,
all the answer. Like, I love solving problems. I'm a fixer. I'm like,
sure.
let's make this more efficient. Let's make it better. Let's make it faster. Like, how do we streamline this? And
But
so
how do you
somebody,
train your people to walk through those processes if you just gotta answer them every time they walk in the door?
so I had to have that sticky note reminder right there. Like, that's a great question. What do you think? And we would walk through a process, and I would have them ask those questions of themselves and just like help them and walk them through that. And it would turn into them knowing that next time I should probably just ask myself these questions before I come in.
I think over time I've created a little bit of a shell, and I think some of my guys might think like I'm just being a dick, but the it's funny because I think now I've got to the point where my guys know that if they come in and ask me some really silly question, my first answers are always going to be, did you go here? Did you go here? Did you go here? And those are like the lowest level, right? And if you answer no to any of those, we got some problems, right? Like I'm gonna tell you, hey, don't call me unless you've went through those three things or whatever the number of things may be. But if you ask me, hey, what's the color of the tile, the floor tile in the laundry room on this house, it's like, well, did you look at the plans? I did. Okay. Did you look at the specification sheet? Did you look somewhere else? Right. Tell me the process that you went through. Let me know what you tried. And then, yeah, if we got this wrong, then great. Then that's something that we need to work on, maybe internally, or another department needs to work on. But let me know that you're trying, that you're kind of critically thinking through this stuff. Because if you're just asking to ask, again, that's not what I pay to do. And at some point, if that's not something that we can retune, or this person does this, every time they have a problem or they encounter some, some small thing, then it might be time to start, going a different direction. But I always will give people an opportunity, right? And I don't always beat them up every single time, but the more that they come back and ask these kind of silly questions, or what I might call silly questions, at least questions that have answers to, I want to know that they've at least made some attempt. And again, that helps us as business owners solve future problems too, right? I'm not saying don't bring me anything, but if there is an answer or there was an answer, I want you to find it. We created the answer to be there for you when you encountered the problem. So if we made the answer and now you're asking me what the answer is, that's a waste of all of our time, right? So I want to make sure, is it just something though that doesn't flow well, or we need to tune, in office or again in another department? Okay, well, that's fine. Let's take a look at that. I want to make sure it's efficient. I want to make sure that you can find it easily. But also I need you to, use these, open them, and make sure you've done that first.
There's something really important that you said in that was, tell me the process you went through. Right? I think a lot of times in this delegation process and this training process and letting go of things, our ego and our pride can get in the way. And I'm saying that strictly from an experiential, like, mistake point of view, right?
Sure.
And we can start to look for an opportunity to say, ha, told you I'm better than you, in our head, right? Ha, told you couldn't be as good as me. And then the important thing of what you said is, tell me the process you went through. And that can be used with so much value once you step into like a true leadership role. Not only can you use it to coach, but you can use it to learn. So when you're asking, tell me the process you went through, initially you could be asking so that you can help guide them to a better process. But if you're looking with eyes wide open and ears wide open, you might hear something in their process that you go, oh, I never would have thought of that, or I haven't thought of that yet. We should add that to our process. Now, maybe they didn't get to the outcome you were looking for yet, and you're still guiding them to get them to a better place. But because you asked the right question, you can hear some things that if you had just said, well, see, that's why you need to do it this way.
Yeah.
Right. You need to do it the way I do it. And we need to do it my way the whole time. Right. But that's a key that unlocks so much when you're willing to always be the student, even in the
Yeah.
leadership role. Because you can
That's a
learn
big,
so much from your team, even as a brand new laborer. They might see something that nobody's ever seen that way before.
for sure. That's a big, I think that's a good point that you bring up too, is that, understanding what may be challenging for somebody, somebody else or another department may not seem challenging to you, or somebody else, doesn't necessarily mean that it's efficient, right? Just because you created the process,
Right.
but it's something that is not easily understandable to, and again, I just say different departments because there are, I think, frequently in most businesses, there are different departments, and some of these departments I'd like to say they speak different languages, right? It's like when you call the computer tech support, if you're not an IT guy or somebody that's savvy with computers and whatnot, they're probably going to know a lot more, and they're probably talking about all kinds of stuff that you may not have any idea what they're talking about because they're speaking IT or computer to you. Right. And if you're not a computer person, maybe you don't understand that. Same thing in our business or any other business. If you've got this department that is savvy on these things, your marketing department's talking to your sales department, and they should be able to talk to each other, but they probably have a little bit of different language that they speak amongst those two teams and various teams. And so whoever's creating that, maybe that SOP or the process or system, may not be producing it in a way that the person who's ultimately going to be using it, or the people that are ultimately going to be using it, can really use efficiently, right? So I think it's important to note what you said about being open to learning and not being so rigid in your mindset as a business owner, and listening to what may be difficult for some of your employees, and maybe even just listen to some of their ideas. And usually what I'll do is, instead of, at least now, I wasn't this way necessarily so early in business, but usually when somebody comes and brings an idea and says, hey, I really think, we should have this process. If I think it's stupid, immediately, I won't shoot it down. I would say 9 times out of 10, I won't shoot it down unless I'm very passionate about it. And it's because I probably already went through this more than once, and maybe I've lost money or something, that's created the PTSD that I need to just immediately say no. Usually I'll put it kind of to a vote or talk to the rest of the team and say, well, what do you guys think about this, right? Do you feel like this is something that's inefficient or needs some help, or are you guys finding that this is troublesome too? Because again, what I may have created even years ago may not hold as much value today in our business as it did then. And maybe times have changed or technology has changed. That's something that frequently happens in business, is you've got technologies or softwares or AI or all these different things that you've now got access to. And, these old systems now may be antiquated. And I think it's important for every business owner to make sure that they're consistently working on and looking at, into their business to make sure that they're using the best systems that they can use for their business, and making sure that they're implementing these systems in the most efficient ways.
Yeah.
If somebody was a business owner listening to this right now, and they wanted to make 2026 like their breakout year, what would you say is the first step that they could or should take to make that happen?
Yeah, that key is the delegation. I think that's going to be, it's the unlock for taking it to the next level. And depending on where you're at, like you said, what that needs to look like, who that role needs to be, what tasks need to be taken off your plate based on your skill, based on that. The key behind delegation, to know what direction to go, and the map on where that's at, is your org chart, your accountability chart. And I don't know, I'm blown away how many businesses I talk to at all kinds of levels, way over $1 million, that they don't have an updated, accurate chart that's physically able to be looked at. They have the idea in their head and everybody kind of knows where everything should sit and be, right? But there's no physical. So creating an org chart or an accountability chart, depending on how you look at it, that is clear and not built for what you have today, but built for what the business needs in the future, long term. And then make sure you put the people in the seats of what they're doing today, so that you can move people around and add team as you go. But org chart and delegate accordingly.
David, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this. I know we're kind of in this weird space between Christmas and New Year's. So thank you for making the time. I super appreciate it. Yeah, best of luck. I know you probably don't need necessarily any extra luck. You've done a great job. You've been very successful at business. And that's why I wanted to have you on here, because it's always, it's very cool for other business owners like me to get some other perspective and hear from people who have been successful, who've done great things. It's also cool that you're in a similar, similar industry that we are in, the home services game, which is, it's a different animal. It's different. I know you said you've done a little bit of retail before too, so
Yeah.
which I have not done, but been involved in building some retail stuff.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. Thanks for all your insight. I want to let people know to please go follow you. Where can they follow you at?
Yeah, Instagram is the easiest place. It's official David Forster. There's more than one out there, apparently. So I'm the official David Forster on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there. And website for coaching services is systemsoversweat.com. And happy to discuss any of that stuff. What's the steps needed for growth as well.
Super appreciate that. So if anybody is interested in getting some coaching, some business coaching, learning a little bit more about, how maybe they can improve their business or their services, or just even help themselves kind of, like I talked about earlier, kind of get out of that rat race and start to figure out how to replace yourself, and do that very methodically and with some help, I highly recommend, giving David a call and at least just talking to him and ask him how he can help. But I definitely appreciate your time. Hope you had a great holiday and Happy New Year.
Likewise. Thank you.